Hey guys, it's the VC Andrews Critiquer taking another shot at editorials. Today we'll be discussing one of my favorite shows of all time, Stranger Things. This sci-fi Netflix series has become quite the powerhouse today, not just because of its likable characters, groundbreaking practical effects, and countless twists and surprises, but mainly for being probably the biggest love letter to 80s and early 90s movies in existence. From E.T. to Poltergeist, to The Goonies, to Ghostbusters, to Terminator, to The Exorcist, to Gremlins, to The Shining, to even The Neverending Story, as you can tell by the background music here. And that's just to name a few. You got a popular 80s movie, chances are it's been referenced here, either subtly or blatantly. But there seems to be one reference that I haven't seen anybody talk about. Eleven's time in the cabin in Season 2 seems very reminiscent of the popular V.C. Andrews novel, Flowers in the Attic. A lot of you may remember that my very first video was an old versus new of the two film adaptations of this story, and now I've decided to return to my namesake and do another video about this gothic cult classic, namely the huge amount of similarities Season 2 shares with it. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I think they're worth pointing out and comparing and contrasting, so let's get right into it. So yeah, the basic scenario of Eleven's confinement in the cabin is pretty similar to the Doppelganger children's confinement in the attic. Both involve children being forced by a parental figure to go into hiding and are forbidden to leave their secluded spot for any reason. The parental figure promises it'll just be for a little while to keep them complacent, but in actuality they have no clue how long it'll take, nor are they especially interested in finding an alternative. The motivations for doing this are very different, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, for a while, the kid tries to make the best of their confinement. I mean, at least they still have a working TV, a lot of games to play, and frequent visits from the parental figure to keep them occupied. But as the wait grows longer and longer, the kid's cabin fever, no pun intended, grows more and more, as does their resentment with the parental figure. The parental figure, of course, tries to calm them down with the old "you'll get to leave soon" promise, but they aren't going to have any of that anymore. And then there's the scene where the parental figure and the kid turn on each other. A lot of us remember that chilling scene where Eleven and Hopper fight, and it seems to be a combination of over 3 moments in the original Flowers story. The first is when the kid sneaks out and returns to find the parental figure waiting for them, pissed as hell that they left their hiding spot. The second is when the kid finally loses every last bit of patience and respect and lashes out at the parental figure for continuously lying about how they'll be let out soon, even though they've been in confinement over a year, and the parental figure gets irritated by their nagging and lack of appreciation for what they have done for them. And the third is when they start hitting and telling one another they hate each other, though it's too bad Kathy doesn't have telepathic powers like Eleven. So yeah, I bet a lot of you are surprised by the huge amount of similarities between these two stories. Hell, even the parental figures look when the kid catches them by surprise look a lot alike. But now let's talk about the differences with this scenario. First off, big shock, there's no incest anywhere in Stranger Things, nor does Hopper try to kill Eleven, unless you count his threat to send her back to the lab. But the biggest difference here is the motives of the parental figure. Actually, I take that back somewhat. The motivation to keep the kid hidden from the world is the same in both cases, to keep one particular person from finding out about them. But their reasons for wanting to couldn't be any more different. Corinne's are entirely self-serving. She doesn't want her pop finding out about her inbred kids because he won't leave her his fortune if he does, so no matter how secluded and mistreated her kids are in this scenario, it doesn't mean hell to her as long as she gets the money. Hopper's motive, on the other hand, was out of love for Eleven. He was keeping her hidden because even though the new lab head Owen seemed a lot nicer than Brenner, he still didn't trust that he wouldn't mistreat Eleven. While the morality of keeping her secret even from the main boys and lying about how long it would be was questionable, his heart was in the right place for keeping her prisoner. How about Eleven's motivation for wanting to escape? Well, it does have some similarities to Kathy and Christopher's. They're developing severe cabin fever and someone they love is suffering. The twins in the former's case from the lack of sunshine and education, and Mike in the latter's case because he's crushed over Eleven's supposed death and turning into a delinquent. But in the case of Kathy and Christopher, they definitely had a lot more to complain about than Eleven. They had their grandmother abusing, starving, and torturing them in any way she could. Eleven had nothing of the sort while in confinement. Again, the whole reason why she was being held prisoner was so she wouldn't have to go back to that lifestyle in case the new heads of the lab turned out to be evil after all. Plus, unlike Corinne, who stopped trying to make her kid's life in captivity bearable very early on, Hopper never gives up trying to make Eleven enjoy her confinement. That doesn't mean she didn't have the right to be unhappy being locked up. I'm just saying the doppelganger situation is a lot more grim, so they're the ones you feel more for. So, to wrap things up, are all these similarities just a coincidence? I honestly have no idea. They aren't nearly as obvious as most of the other references on the show, but they aren't subtle enough for me to understand why nobody else on the web has pointed them out yet. But anyway, now I have, and I'd love to hear what you guys think of my thoughts. Just leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And now I just have one last question. Do you think Season 4 will reference an American Tail or the Great Mouse Detective? Probably not, but I can still dream, can't I? Bye guys!